My guest today scaled a security franchise from one location to 400. You go to the map where you see, you find the locations he's in, and you have to actually search for things, and you find that they're all over the place. In the process of doing that, he racked up 250 million American dollars in revenue, all at the same time, he says, while building leaders with purpose. He's a serial entrepreneur, he's an author, and he's a growth strategist. And he is on a mission to show that commercial success starts with intentional leadership. Welcome to Leadership That Sells. This is a podcast about the real conditions under which leadership and sales actually work and where they quietly break down. I spend my time talking to founders, to chief execs, to sales leaders and operators who've had to make the decisions when effort was high, pressure was real, and the usual answers didn't quite fit. So we're not here to try and trade slogans or fancy frameworks. We're trying to surface patterns, things that consistently create momentum, and the stuff that gets in the way. And then what experienced leaders eventually learn to stop doing. So if you're responsible for results, not just ideas, you are in the right place. And you're here today with me and Reid Nyffeler. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me. Excited to begin the conversation.
Well, let's dig into that then. So you talk about the exponential leader. Now, I know what an exponential function is, right? Something that gets bigger by the function of itself. What is an exponential leader and why is it, as you say, critical to business growth?
Yeah, great question. I think, many times as we're looking at ourselves, what we can produce on a daily basis, we can add people to our team, right? So we may have 3 to 5 to 7 people, but where we really see growth is when we multiply our team. Yeah. And so if we can, and that's really what an exponential leader will do, is they're working through the people that are on their team to multiply their effect instead of just add to their growth. And so that's really the objective here is how do we get people that multiply our effort instead of those who just add to our objectives?
All with bells on. I mean, yes. I think the number of conversations I've had both back in the days where I had a real job and then when I've been out in the world trying to help other people, it's, well, I've got 5 salespeople and I'm doing £5 million. If I have another salesperson, I'll do £6 million.
Right.
And number one, no, you won't, because that shit just doesn't work like that. But actually, surely you'd want to be doing not 6, but 7 or 8. Surely there's a multiplier effect in there somehow you have to try and capture.
And I think you bring up a valid point because actually it can work the other way. There's really, we can divide our efforts. If you're a brand new leader and you just stepped into it, sometimes you actually produce less because the time you're allocating to your sales efforts, you're now training, and that person is not focused on what you're focused on. So it's dividing your effort. And then the next step of that is you never want to be dividing your effort, right? Where it's, it's infinitesimally affected. Then you might be subtracting your effort, right? Where someone may step in and you're talking and they say something that you've got to recover from. So like, I just got them to this point in the sales process and now they're subtracting from what I just shared. Then the next step is add, right? Of course we want to add, right? We want to add. And then the final step is multiply. And that's what our objective is here. And so, in that sales training and leadership role, we have to step into those 4 things. And there's traps at each one. And there's reasons why each one happened. And there's things we do as leaders that, are a result of each of those, whether it's dividing, subtracting, adding, or multiplying. And so that's really what, I'm here to help share is how do we get to that multiply? Right? And how do we avoid the traps of division?
My kids have been doing maths and they're coming back and they're telling me, and I can't remember the it's not an acronym. It's one of those things. It's got the, the letters for the words for the letters, and it's the order of operations. So you do the brackets and then you do the multiplication and then you do this, and then that one first. And like anything, I think in business, there is an order of operations. Is there a system? Is there a series? Is there an approach that you should follow? What do you do first?
Yeah, and I think it's leader selection. The first thing is leader selection, right? There's, traps that we will have, that there's people that we can get trapped and get into people that divide because they are telling us they're great, right? I mean, a division is saying, hey, I can do everything you want to do. And we have to see through that, right? We have to look at the equation, order of operation to the point you're making is saying, wait a minute, if I kind of order of operation, the first thing that's most important is leader selection that I'm going to invest in. Because what will be the consistent piece, the equals, is our time, where we're investing our time. So we want to select what is our time. And so in an equation, right, zero is a number that if you multiply, it will not help you, right? It'll actually take everything away. And so if they have no capability, zero capability, and you multiply, no matter whether you multiply, you divide, you add, you subtract, zero really doesn't help you. And so what is the largest number that they can contribute? And that's what we want to look at. And that comes down to character, that comes down to experience. Quite frankly, in my experience, it comes down to drive. And it's not what they say, it's what they do. And so I think the first thing I would tell people to say is, don't just listen to what they say, see the effects of what they've done, right? Performance has a way of showing you the results, right? If you're performing, there's a result. However, people can tell you, but there's no evidence. And so the first thing I would say is there evidence, historical evidence of progress in their life? And now what I didn't say was success. What I said is progress. Because in the past, success can be circumstantial, right? However, progress will be consistent.
Yeah, totally. I mean, sorry, I'm interrupting you there because the big thing is we're hiring people now who have had a couple of years of struggles. Oh, but I was just unlucky in the last two.
Right.
No, mate, you weren't unlucky. You were just shit. You were caught out. You were lucky in the previous 15.
That's right.
I turned 52 this year. Now, obviously, I'm vastly older than you. Mere 31, I can see there from the hairline. That's a man, big man. So I've gone through a number of cycles now. I've gone through the dot-com crash. I've gone through the 2008 bullshit. I've gone through this all these things. And it's all cyclical. And you see, but I think, frankly, I've been in a recession since I started work, really. We've had free money and more free money and yet more free money. And all the free money has caused everything to go up, including quotas, including your salaries and your results. But it's really now that the rubber is hitting the road when we're being asked to really perform in straightened situations where people do not want to buy stuff they do not need to buy.
That's right.
Right? And by the way, it's PEDMAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally.
That's how you have, there's always those acronyms. Although some acronyms are difficult to remember, is that one. I prefer acronyms that are maybe easier to remember. I think that first piece is we're talking about that equation to lead exponentially is, again, selecting the right person. Right. And then the second is let's put them in the right context. Right. And so, again, if we're using your equation analogy, if you put the zero before or afterwards in a division, where's that at? And so I think our next job is once we have the right salesperson or the right leader that we're putting in place, we want to put them in the best place for them to have the greatest impact. Right. And that's our job as their manager and their leader to say, okay, are they someone that's customer facing? Are they someone that is strategic? Are they someone that can foster a conversation that would lead to a sale? And so what result are there? And so there are probably listeners in your audience that say, you know what, I'm a good person, but I've been put in the wrong situation.
Yeah.
And so that situation can be one, who are they around? Who's the leader they're following? And does that leader lean into what they're doing? Do they align with that leader? And so maybe let's invert this and say, you're the person that is going to choose a leader. Make sure you align, right? Put that there because when we multiply, that means that both numbers in that instance work well together to truly be exponential. And so we want to make sure we find that leader that's a high value leader that we can multiply alongside. And so then as a leader, the next step is finding that right person and putting them in the right situation. And so that might be eliminating it. I had a conversation just yesterday afternoon with an individual, and I said, where are you most likely to be successful? And we went through the kind of the vertical or the area that he said, I really understand this area of business. I really understand the clients that are here. I understand what they're going through. It'd be foolish for me not to encourage them to step into an area where they have strength. right? As opposed to learning a whole nother industry. So that's the second part of leading exponentially. The first, selecting the right person. The second, selecting the right environment. And so that's what I would say is the second criteria as we're looking at how do we find exponential leaders. And then we'll talk about the subsequent criteria as we kind of settle this one in. So find the right area for the right leaders, the next step.
There you go. So, I think it's paraphrasing Jim Collins, he says something like, get the right people on the bus,
That's
right?
right.
And then you've got the whole Gallup thing going on there, which is lead from strengths, find their strengths,
That's
give
right.
them things that they're good at. I mean, this whole, I want to find my purpose, and I want to find things that really, my ikigai and all that stuff. If you do things you're good at, you will be astonished. You'll just
Yeah,
be
that's right. And your
astonished.
purpose is usually what you're good at, candidly. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's not
usually my
hard.
purpose isn't what I'm terrible at. So those two things kind of fall hand in hand here.
Yeah.
And so once we have that first step is right person, right? That's clear on their purpose, right place,
Hmm.
right? Then it's the right leadership, right? How do we appropriately lead them? And one of the first things I do when I have a direct report, I said, who's been the most effective leader that has ever led you, right? Meaning,
Beautiful.
I've never managed you, but you've been managed before. So clarify to me, what environment have you flourished the most in? And my job as a leader is to adjust my approach to get the most out of that individual instead of having them adjust to my style as a leader. And there's a little bit of both, right? Clearly. But I should lead them in their most effective role going forward. And we'll use an analogy here again, and we'll follow your children and students in the math class, right? So some people, and there's really three ways that we can learn, right? Are auditory, visual, or kinesthetic, right? And so in my children, some I can tell one to do something, and they'll be like, all right, I can hear what you're saying, and I can do that. I have to show another, like, no, do it this way. I got to show you. And another has to do it and say, wow, I tried this and I have to adjust, right? So those are the three ways that we learn. And there's sometimes a balance or a mix of that. And many of us learn differently in those environments. And so now as a leader, I'm saying, wait a minute, if I'm training you as a salesperson or a leader, let's just go out in the field. Let's go out in the field and fail. Then I can teach you the principles. Some people are like, you know what? Just tell me what I need to do, and then I'll go figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
Right. And then so they tell me what to do, and some like, show me, you do it, and then I'll watch you, and then I'll learn from that. And so the next stage is we develop them exponentially in accordance with the ability they learn the best. So the first step is we select the right leader. The second step, we put them in the right position. Then after that, we're training them in a way that they receive and support training. And so that's the third step. And so again, I think it's the next training. And once we kind of settle that in, we can jump to the subsequent steps from there. But I think the next step is training them a way that effectively helps them understand how to be effective in their role.
Let's go back to you just for a second here, and then we'll go into the rest of this journey that we're taking people through. Now, you have built and scaled franchise businesses, which is an
Yep.
interesting one. So you had an idea, and then you thought, well, I can go out and do this myself, or I can get other people to do the work. So you developed the concept and took it to the market and said,
Sure.
look what you can do with this. Okay. In scaling that, what would you say was the leadership lesson that had the biggest impact on getting that sort of sales growth?
Yeah, I think it's ultimately what I'm unfolding, right? I mean, as a leader, it's placing the right franchisees in the right areas, right? Because I can pick any two franchisees, and some will universally be successful. A small percentage will be universally successful wherever they're at. But an exponentially high percentage of those are successful because they grew up in the area that they're servicing. They have experience in the industry that we're operating in, a security industry. They have the disposition that relates to the people that are in that area and the clients they serve. And so that leadership, a large part of that role is identifying the people of character and also getting rid of the people that did not feel, align with our values, right? Because they can also be that divider or that subtractor of your culture. And so I found the people that were adders and multipliers, and then I placed them in areas where they'll have the greatest multiplication. And then if you saw on my daily basis as I'm interacting with these leaders that are franchise owners and key employees, I am adjusting my style to support them in accordance with what they're doing, right? I mean, throughout the United States where we predominantly operate, if you just come to the United States and you go to New York, or you go to a small community in a rural area, there's going to be a totally different personality of those communities, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get your fast talker in New York, New Yorkers, and you're going to get your people that have, a handshake means everything in the Midwest, right? And so I am adjusting based upon the environment as the leader, similarly in that same respect. And so then you have expanded your leadership abilities, right? If we're only able to manage in that New York persona, we're going to limit our opportunity for growth to New York. And so I've learned to adjust by understanding those first two things. Who are they? Really, where are they operating? And then how can I lead them most effectively, right? And then the next step is how do I recognize them?
Hmm.
I think the fourth step of that is, and a lot of leaders make this mistake, many times we try to correct, but we don't direct. And what do I mean by that? We're going to say, you
Yes.
made this mistake and don't do it again. And so when we pull that out of our mistake, out of our daily activity, we don't know what to replace that with. So a good teacher in a math equation can say, hey, you made a mistake here. I'm not just going to mark a red X through it. I'm going to say, here's how you do it next time. We correct. Then upon correction, we reward.
Uh-huh.
And I think today in society, it's a trap to say, just encourage always, right? Give
Yeah.
them a friendly like or a thumbs up on everything. No, that doesn't help them because we don't know where our parameters are, right? We don't know what gets rewarded
Hmm.
and we don't know what gets corrected. So if you're only correcting and you're not rewarding, you're not going to get them to continue to do that. But if you're only rewarding, they're not going to make progress. So as a leader, we need to appropriately say, hey, here's what you need to improve. And here's what I'm going to recognize that you do well. And do those sincerely or authentically, and you will really see progress. And that's the fourth step.
I think if you are the number one is I think most of the leadership lessons that I've ever come across have been validated again and again as I watch my children grow. And the reward or the correction, if you continually say, and I see there's kids out there with they're my children's friends, and their parents say, "Oh, that was good, dear." No, bloody wasn't. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Don't do that again. Congratulations, you've just motivated your son or your daughter to act randomly
Yeah,
because there's
exactly.
no limits, there's no ideas, there's no boundaries, there's no guidance. I mean, what the hell?
Right.
Anyway, okay, so we're rewarding, and then what?
Yeah. And this leads to the fourth and what I would say the final principle and the one that buttons it all up and ties it together. And that's saying, do it consistently. I mean, I know I may look young, but I'm 49. I'm only 3 years younger than you are. And I've been at this for 20 years, nearly 20 years. And I think the thing that really stands out is I have led exponentially because I'm consistent. And again, we'll go back to your math equation because that's kind of been the theme of this episode. How many times does the multiplier X mean multiply? Every time, right? How many times does the addition symbol mean add? Every time, So now if we know that we can consistently count on that, we can build around it. And so as a leader, if they know that every time they come to you and they're successful, you recognize them. And every time they're not in acting in accordance, you're going to correct them. And that every time and we work on our equation backwards now, every time you're leading them, you're going to lead in association with the strongest way to respond. And every time you select a market, you're going to select the right person. And every time you select the individual, they're going to align with your values. Now you're leading exponentially. But if any of those areas you do that inconsistently, it's going to break down the equation.
Yeah.
And people lose sight of that. I think we, as leaders on the other side of that, we're like, what is everybody telling me to do today? What is culture telling me to do today? Right? If we go back to the point you were making, the timeless principles are timeless for a reason, right? Whether we had the internet, whether we had computers, whether we had even written paper, if you look throughout the duration of history, the timeless principles that I just gave you, right? Let's go back to rudimentary times. We select a warrior not because of random drawing. They're showing a little proficiency and they're going to protect our culture at the beginning. Then we put them at the front lines because they're effectively the strongest person, right? Then we encourage them in victory to get better and better, at which point then they consistently win battles and we trust them. This is I'm just imagining 1,000 years ago, right? That's leadership selection. And we look at how the Greeks had conquered a lot of for the same reasons, right? We look at how the Romans conquered historically the same reasons. And that's all leadership principles that are still timeless to today. And if we think that we can't lean into many of those principles and apply them today, we're making a mistake.
You talk in your book about purpose, and the
Yeah.
word you use there is transcendental.
Yeah.
Transcendental purpose. Now, I think you would most normally associate transcendental with meditation or getting out of your
Yeah.
head, but transcendental is an interesting word. How
Yeah,
do
it's
you?
transcendent, right? And
Yes,
so essentially beyond yourself, right? So
exactly.
first of all, I want to kind of put these two together. First, I wrote two books. The first one is Transform Through Purpose, and you're referring to that book.
Yes,
And the second is Lead
lead
Exponentially. And so
exponentially. Yeah.
the first one is understanding transforming through purpose. What is our purpose, and how do we apply that to our lives in every area, right? So I'm going to walk through the three areas of that. The first is transcendent, as you mentioned. It means it's beyond me. Our purpose is never about us.
No.
Right. If it's about us, the world ends. Our world ends, right? We won't have
Mhm.
children. We won't have significant others. We won't have big organizations. It can't be about us, period.
It's in
So
service
that
of
our
the
purpose
other.
must be transcendent, right?
Yes,
Because
must
I
be.
think, and Paul, as you, I'm sure, have talked to many people, there's a lot of people think everything's about them. They
There
have
are a
not
lot of
clearly
them,
found their
yeah.
purpose
There are a
because
lot of people.
they think it's about them. So that's transcendent first. Then it's universal. And
Mhm.
that means it can be applied everywhere. It's not just applied. Our purpose is not just about work, but it's about our family. It's about, our fun. Everywhere we're at, it's universal. And then it's eternal. It's what we do the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Our purpose, we were created on purpose for a purpose. And so that transcendent means it's not about us, right? And then the second book is Lead Exponentially. Once we've clarified and identified our purpose, and I'll give you mine so it's clear there, through intuitive interaction, propel leaders over their self-imposed barriers to live out their unique purpose. So intuitive interaction, just like this, Paul, we're having a conversation. Propel leaders, that's your audience,
Yep.
right? That's the audience that hopefully they can move forward over their self-imposed barriers. Sometimes that's just a structural understanding of how to lead exponentially so they can live out their purpose, right? And so then once they understand their purpose, then now saying, all right, I know my purpose. Now, how do I multiply that? Which is kind of the context of this conversation. And that is leading exponentially. And I identify who I should invest in. I place them in the right spot. I train and lead them accordingly by recognizing their successes and failures and helping correct that behavior. And then I do it consistently. And I'm going to lead exponentially as a result. And so those two things come together, but it starts with that transcendent. It can't be about me purpose, because how many people, and I would ask your audience this question, would follow someone that's 100% about them? We in this world have the choice to follow someone. We're going to follow leaders that are going to make us better,
Yeah.
right? That's what we have the choice. Why wouldn't we do that? If they're going to make our lives and our families better, those are the people we want to follow. And so that's the transcendent nature of who we're going to choose to follow.
I think you touch on a number of different things. And you mentioned we were created here for a purpose. We were created and bought at a price. We
That's
were
right.
put here we as a there's no accident. There's a
That's
miracle of
right.
what happened to us, and our job is, I think, essentially this transcendent one. It is to serve. And the
Hmm.
first thing you do to somebody who's miserable is you say, A, get your arse outside, son, and go and help someone else.
That's right.
Go and serve someone. Because the minute you look inwards, all you see is a spiral that goes down.
That's
The
right.
minute you look outwards, your chin lifts, you see the horizon, you see God's good sunshine, and off and onwards you go.
That's right.
And in the service of others is where we find most meaning
That's right.
as
That's
humans,
right.
regardless of business people. And if you can wrap this human service in with an entrepreneurial flair and a creativity for strategy and commerciality, you're onto a thing.
Yeah, and that is again structure, right? I mean, if you look at a simple equation, we're going to continue to go back to that.
I love how
Two
you're doing
plus
this. You take on, keep going. I love
it's
this.
two plus two equals four.
Yeah.
But then we go look at these mathematicians, they're taking those same basic principles and compounding it with brackets and other equations and systems and algorithms that have worked in the past. But they started with a foundational piece, right? And so how do we do similarly the same thing, right? We build on the basic principles, and then we get comfortable and consistent doing that, and then we lead exponentially. So if the first step for someone is to say, I need to find my purpose. The second step is saying I have a handful of people that lead me. Then I lead, in my case, an organization that's in 48 states and in multiple countries, including throughout Europe. We are then doing that because I've built on those principles. I'm adding other people to those equations that are multiplying each other. And that's how we truly get exponential, right? Is that now, in my case, it transcends language and culture.
Mhm.
Because if you go anywhere in the world, math essentially works the same way, right? Even though language changes, equations are a universal language.
Yep.
And I believe leading exponentially does that. The words or the dialect, in your case, the way your accent is versus mine, may change, but the leadership principle is the same, right? And I'm just communicating that. And we may have some cultural, understanding that we need to consider, but at the same time as we can still lead exponentially, and the world can come together as a result. And so that, however, never is about a leader. It is about the people that are contributing and the benefit they get by following that leader. And so if we can communicate that, we can truly lead exponentially. And so I think for your audience too, if I were sitting there saying, I want someone to follow me, I would ask yourself this question: what benefit do they get when they choose to follow me? Not what benefit do I get when they sell on my behalf? Or what benefit do I get if what that can't be, they get a paycheck, because they can get that anywhere. What benefit do they specifically get from following you directly that they can't get elsewhere? And that if you can't answer that question, you should really dive in deep to say, what do I offer someone? Maybe it's development. Maybe it's opportunity. Maybe it's an environment. I remember, 10 years ago, I had an employee that worked here, and they came up to me and said, thank you. Thank you for finally having a stable organization with a stable job that allowed for me to go buy my first house. I didn't realize that. They'd been 10 years in their career trying to find their place. They ever felt comfortable enough or had consistent income enough that could stabilize their livelihood enough that they could go buy their first house. And so I realized, wait a minute, their benefit was stability at home. They didn't necessarily need a career path that, led going forward. And some people don't want that. They don't want, 10 layers ahead. But many people want stability in their career of an organization and leadership, and that goes back to that consistency. And so sometimes that's what we're offering individuals. And so do think through that as well as people are looking through that. What are you offering that they can't get somewhere else, and lean into that and provide that?
To bring us in for a landing then, what can you offer? If I were to give you 10,000 billboards outside every airport in the world, and the world's largest Sharpie, what would be your concise, consistent, transcendent message for the entire planet? One thing.
Yeah, for the one thing for the entire planet was, and I think you kind of leaned into that, is find out how you can help someone else. And then make that one person, two people. How can you help two people? How can you help 5 people? How can you help 100 people? How can you help 1,000 people? And what I've realized is it's actually not doing more things, is doing less things more times. And because we're created for a specific purpose. And so what is that item? What is that thing? And maybe for the audience that's out there that's trying to say, well, I just don't know what that is. Start here. What do people come to you most often for? Right? What are they coming to you? There's something they're seeing in you that they're asking you about, right? My kids are not coming to me for sympathy, right? I'll be honest. I'm not my wife is the person they come to for sympathy, right? They skin their knee. I'm saying, get back up and get in there. You're fine, right? I mean, that's just my role.
Blood.
So my purpose is not sympathy, okay? I might give you empathy over time, but it's not sympathy. And no one would say, if I may, project humor, and that people are coming to me for leadership roles, et cetera. So that leans into that. And so now I'm saying, for me, it might be this lead exponentially piece. They're coming. How do I develop as a leader? So then I'm saying, okay, now next step for that, as we're kind of wrapping this up, if they have identified what's there, how can I consistently and concisely deliver that message? How do I simplify that message, right? I gave the equation. How do I simplify that message so then they can apply it? Because information without application is worthless. So how do I, as a leader that has a 30-minute podcast here, give them a tool they can go apply in their lives? And so that's the next step. If they're coming to you for that, how do you button that all up so you can hand it off to somebody else so their lives can be improved? And that would be my challenge to the audience to say, okay, find out how you can help one, two, three, four, five. Then how do you simplify that message so you can do more of the same instead of more things, right? And then the next part is, how do you eliminate things that are distracting you from doing those things? And if you can figure that out as a leader, you're going to see exponential success.
Exponential success from exponential leadership. I think that is a beautiful place to end this. And it just lets me say, read Nyffeler. Thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you, Paul. Great conversation, and challenge your audience to go apply it and see the benefit of it.